Welcome, everyone. The Milford Daily News, in an editorial of August 23rd, 1910, wrote about the pending gift of this park from Susan Preston Draper and said, I quote, "It does not require the eyes of a mystic prophet to foresee the day when Congregational Park will be a most elegant oasis in this bustling community." Close quote. No question, bustling had a different definition than it does today, but the centerpiece of this park always has been the General Draper statue. Proud, tall, and strong, it has watched over this town for over 100 years. It is indeed a symbol of the character of our community, which has triumphed over adversity from time and circumstance to remain the bustling community that it is today. It is a gift of Daniel Chester French and Henry Bacon, a work of art, a true national treasure. Our responsibility as citizens is to preserve and protect this national treasure. So it is fitting that we are here today through the efforts of the Historical Commission to mark this centennial event and appreciate this beautiful statue that originated from the Draper family. And before we go forward with the rest of the events, we're very pleased today to have a number of representatives from the Draper family who are here. And if you'd like to stand and be recognized, we have George and Charlotte Draper from Maine, the great-great-grandson of General William Draper. Raleigh Draper from Atlanta, Georgia, the great-great-grandson of General William Draper. Bill and Nancy Gannett from Hopedale, ancestors. Arthur D. Calfee from Falmouth, an ancestor. We thank you for sharing this event with us today, and we thank your generosity of your family, which was the origin of this event. There are also a few other folks that I'd like to recognize. My colleagues from the Board of Selectmen are here. Dino DeBartolomeus, who's in the vehicle over there, and Bill Buckley are both here. Parks Director Mike Brashani and Park Commissioner Art Moran are here. Did a great job getting this park in tip-top condition for today's event. Our Veterans Agent John Pilla is also here. John, thank you. Superintendent of Schools Bob Tremblay is here as well. Bob. And an individual who is greatly responsible for the beautification and preservation of this park, as well as many, many other treasures in the town of Milford, our local historian, Paul Curran. I would now like to introduce the Milford High School Band for a rendition of the Star Spangled Banner. Thank you very much. Speaking about Daniel Chester French is Donna Hassler, Director of Chesterwood Summer Homes and Studio.
Thank you. I'm honored to be part of this rededication ceremony of the General Draper Equestrian Monument by Daniel Chester French and his friend, the architect Henry Bacon, who designed the landscape in Draper Park as well as the pedestal for his work. I would especially like to thank Anne LaMontagne, who personally extended an invitation to me to join all of you in this wonderful celebration as a representative from French's former country retreat, Chesterwood, a National Trust historic site in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and as an art historian interested in American sculpture. When Daniel Chester French was commissioned in 1910 by Susan Preston Draper to erect this memorial to her husband, which she presented to the town of Milford, he had already established his reputation as the Dean of American Sculpture in the 20th century and completed a number of public monuments in his 26-foot-high studio at Chesterwood, including the George Washington Equestrian for Paris, France, the Francis Parkman Memorial for Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts, the Joseph Hooker Equestrian Monument at the State Capitol in Boston, the Melvin Memorial in Concord, Massachusetts, and his first Abraham Lincoln Memorial for the grounds of the State Capitol in Lincoln, Nebraska. In fact, French was working on his standing figure of Lincoln, the first of his monumental Lincoln portraits, at the time he was modeling this realistic portrayal of General Draper as he would have looked in his formal military uniform. We perhaps know Daniel Chester French and his work best from his earliest monument, the Minuteman, in Concord, Massachusetts, dedicated in 1875, when the young sculptor was only 25 years of age, having completed a few modeling lessons with May Alcott, sister of Louisa May Alcott, the accomplished writer, and anatomical drawing with the artist and physician Dr. William Rimmer in Boston. We also know the work of French by his most famous monument, the seated figure of Abraham Lincoln for the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., dedicated in 1922. Born on April 20th, 1850 in Exeter, New Hampshire, Daniel Chester French created more than 100 public monuments before his death at Chesterwood on October 7th, 1931. He was the monument maker, as I like to call him, and his extraordinary life and times are yet to be told. The citizens of Milford are to be congratulated for your excellent stewardship and appreciation of one of Daniel Chester French's 5 equestrian monuments that has a prominent place in your historic city. The General Draper Monument is relevant today because of your recognition and understanding of William F. Draper's contributions to his country and the town of Milford during his lifetime as a courageous Civil War commander and influential industrialist, congressman, and ambassador to Italy. You also recognize the national importance of the sculptor and the architect who created this work of art in his memory, and are here to commemorate a historical moment that took place almost 100 years ago. By the sheer number of people, 10,000 were recorded who attended the unveiling of French's General Draper Monument on September 25th, 1912, including the sculptor himself. You know how important this tribute was at the time to the citizens of Milford and beyond. This rededication ceremony is now part of your history. As many of you know from contemporary newspaper reports about this commission, French received what he thought was a very handsome sum of $50,000 for this equestrian monument, which is the equivalent of $1.1 million today. However, We must remember that sculpture is a collaborative medium, and according to French's account book, which is now in the Chapin Library at Williams College, he in turn paid a talented studio assistant, Francis Packer, for his work on the horse approximately $10 a day for 248 days, or about $2,500. Henry Bacon was paid $3,000 for the architectural setting and the design for the pedestal. The Norcross Brothers Company in Milford received $9,200 for furnishing the pink stone called Stony Greek granite for the pedestal. The Gorham Foundry in Providence, Rhode Island was paid $5,800 for the casting of the full-size plaster model in bronze, and it cost $7,500 to erect the bronze equestrian on its pedestal. It's curious to me that it cost more to put the sculpture in place than it did to finalize the work in bronze. Any accountants in the crowd figure out how much French was left with at the end of the day for this commission? From my calculations, it was about $22,000, or a little less than half of what he was originally paid. The history of equestrian statues goes back to ancient Greece, when the subject of the sculptural composition was typically portraits of rulers and military commanders. One of the most iconic forms of public art, the equestrian monument is probably the most labor-intensive and expensive objects to produce from the lost wax method. It is significant that French's equestrian monument of General Draper was cast by the Gorham Foundry in Providence, Rhode Island. It was a highly reputable foundry known for its work in the lost wax casting method on this scale. This particular casting method assured that every mark of the sculptor's modeling tool was visible in the final work, such as the articulation of the general's gloved hand holding the reins, as well as the intricate design of the horse's leather saddle. And I invite you today to take a good look at this sculpture as I've done for the first time, and you can really see the fur on the horse and various areas on the sculpture where the detail is really extraordinary. Daniel Chester French himself described his General Draper monument as very ornamental, most likely because of such attention to the details in this particular sculpture. A newspaper clipping dated July 22nd, 1912, stated that, quote, "The likeness is perfect, according to these witnesses." And in fact, General Draper's widow, Susan Draper, and her daughter did visit Daniel Chester French at Chesterwood when he was in the process of modeling the sculpture, and they only had high praise for the work. They stayed with the French family for 2.5 days, French had recorded in his diary. And to reinforce that identification, there is an inscription on the front of the pedestal with General William Franklin Draper's name and his life and death dates, 1842 to 1910. On the sides are inscribed the names of the battle in which he was engaged. On the side toward Park Street are the dates of General Draper's years of service in Congress and as an ambassador. I hold the reason most people do not appreciate public sculpture is because there is usually no information about the person it commemorates or memorializes. With the General Draper Monument, this is not the case. Having completed 3 equestrian figures before General Draper, French was certainly familiar with his studies abroad with the most well-known equestrian, Marcus Aurelius, on the Capitoline Hill in Rome, which was the prototype for Renaissance sculpture. But it was Donatello's equestrian of Erasmo de Narni, also known as Gattamelata, in Padua, Italy, that the artist probably revered the most. In a similar fashion to the Donatello's equestrian figure, General Draper sits high on his horse, looking out to the distance. The emotion on his face is serious. He is a composed, alert, and watchful leader. Donatello was the first to make a statement in bronze of the power of the real-life individual. He did not need to embellish or make grander whom Gattamelata was. The simple depiction of the real man was enough to convey this power. The horse, too, is animated in both sculpture, a successful complement to the self-contained and courageous air of the rider. It was Donatello who first modeled Gattamelata and his horse in life size, reflecting the belief in individualism and humanism during the Italian Renaissance. During the American Renaissance in this country from the 1870s to the 1920s, Daniel Chester French looked to other precedents closer to home for his equestrian monuments, including the bronze equestrian figures of George Washington by Henry Kirk Brown in Union Square, New York, and by Thomas Ball in the Boston Public Gardens. Ball was especially significant to French's career because he studied sculpture in Florence with the neoclassical artist at the same time his reputation was launched for his statue of the Minuteman. It's interesting to note that General Draper himself formally presented Daniel Chester French's equestrian statue of General Devens to Worcester County in 1906, little knowing that someday the sculptor would be present at the unveiling of a similar monument in his honor. In closing, I'd like to point out that Daniel Chester French and Henry Bacon collaborated on over 50 public sculptures throughout the country. The importance of this particular sculptor and architect working together on the setting for a work of public art can only be summarized in the culmination of their artistic career with the Lincoln Memorial, a memorial that is still visited day and night by millions of people around the world. French and Bacon shared a lifelong interest in classical art and architecture. After Bacon's death in 1924, French wrote, and I quote, "He was a perfectionist, classicist, and exponent of the beautiful, a man's man, an architect's architect, the soul of integrity, a scorner of shame, the staunchest of friends. To him there was only one path, the right one, and he followed it not from choice, but because he saw no other. No trouble was too great, no expenditure of time counted, no sacrifice of his profits mattered, if these things could make for excellence. This was as applicable to the making of a gravestone as it was to the creation of the Lincoln Memorial," unquote. I invite you to come to Chesterwood, French's former country home, studio and gardens in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, which is open to the public 7 days a week through Sunday, October 14th, to learn more about this extraordinary artist as well as his architect friend, for it was Henry Bacon who designed French's impressive studio in 1897 in order for the sculptor to begin modeling his first equestrian monument of George Washington for Paris, France. Bacon also designed French's residence and a garage on the property for the artist's daughter's Buick Runabout, which is now a temporary exhibition space. At the age of 80, Daniel Chester French was interviewed by a reporter from the New York Herald Tribune who asked if he spent all of his time at Chesterwood. He replied that for 6 months, May through October, he was in heaven. The other 6 months, well, he was in New York. I look forward to seeing all of you in heaven at Chesterwood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hassler, for that wonderful information, which really highlights why this is such a national treasure that we have here in our own backyard. The next item that we'd like to have is the Fife and Drum Corps, Peter Emmerich's Corps. Thank you. We hope the drummers are going to be okay. We're pleased to have with us today a local historian from Hopedale, Dan Malloy, to talk about General Draper.
First of all, thank you to the Milford Historical Commission for organizing this wonderful event. I drop in at the museum from time to time, and it seems to me that at least a year ago, perhaps more, they were first talking and planning of this, so it takes quite a bit to put something like this together. General Draper's autobiography was first published in 1908. The title, appropriately, was Recollections of a Varied Career. Most of what I have to say about him today are from that book. William F. Draper was a remarkable man by just about any standard. Born in Lowell in 1843, his parents, George and Hannah Draper, moved to Hopedale in 1853, where George joined his brother Ebenezer as a member of the utopian Hopedale community. It was intended that William would go to Harvard, but his father thought that he was too young to start there after he finished school in Hopedale. So it was decided that he should go to work and learn the textile business. Over the next couple of years, William worked at mills in North Uxbridge, Oregon, Connecticut, Biddeford, Maine, and Lawrence, Massachusetts. With the start of the Civil War, George abandoned the pacifist ideals of the community and gave his support to the Union cause. William wanted to enlist immediately, but his father refused permission, saying there were plenty volunteering then, but if the time came that more were needed, he could go. In his autobiography, William wrote, "After our reverse at Bull Run, my father gave his consent to my enlistment and set about raising a company in our town of Milford and vicinity, selecting suitable men among them to serve as officers so that I might go under favorable auspices." Continuing, Draper wrote, "All the preliminary arrangements having been made for raising a company of volunteers in Milford, headquarters for enlistment were opened on the 5th of September, 1861 at the town hall, and mine was one of the first signatures on the roll. They drilled first in Milford and then at the agricultural grounds in Worcester. At the end of October, first by train and later by ship, they headed south. Over the next 3 years, William participated in a large number of battles, as can be seen on the pedestal of the statue. One of William's schoolmates in Hopedale had been Lilla Joy. Lilla was from Nantucket. Because her parents were quite involved with abolitionism and the other reform movements of the era, she had been sent to school in Hopedale since it was a known center for such things. While in the Army, William proposed to Lilla by mail, and she accepted. Returning to Hopedale on a brief furlough, Captain Draper and Miss Joy were married by Aidan Ballou. "We were not married upon as long a notice or as in much style as might be considered desirable today," he wrote, "but I don't think we lived the less happily for want of either." The next day after the marriage, George and Lilla accompanied to William as far as Jersey City. Quoting again, "The dreaded time came at last, and giving a parting kiss to my newly made wife and a grasp of the hand to my father, I was borne out of the depot and away toward the south." After surviving several campaigns, in May of 1864, Draper, by then a major, was severely wounded at the Battle of the Wilderness in Virginia. "When wounded in the Wilderness, I fell unconscious. A blow as though I was struck with a club on the left breast. A feeling of surprise that I was hit at all. I had begun to believe in my star. And the certainty for the location of the blow that I was killed was all that I felt." The next few pages tell an amazing story of Draper's survival during the chaos of the ongoing battle. He was eventually taken to a hospital in Washington and later spent 2 months in Hopedale, returning to the Army in August. Draper participated in several more campaigns until near the end of 1864. With mixed feelings, he resigned and returned home. The rank of brevet general was awarded after the war. Considering that he'd often commanded units far larger than would have been typical for his rank, and all the action that he saw, I think the promotion was well deserved. In the years after the war, Draper went to work in the family business, E.D. and G. Draper and Company. In 1867, he became a partner with his father by buying out his uncle's share. Over the next decade, he and Lilla had 4 children. Lilla died in 1884. During a vacation at Narragansett Pier in 1889, Draper met Susan Preston, the daughter of a Confederate general. William and Susan were married in 1890. In 1891, their daughter Margaret was born. In 1916, Margaret became Princess Boncompagni when she married an Italian prince. During the 1890s, General Draper served 2 terms in Congress and was ambassador to Italy for 4 years. General Draper died in 1910. He and his family are buried in the family mausoleum at Hopedale Village Cemetery.
Thank you very much, Dan. I would next like to introduce from the Milford Police Department, Russell Poissant, to play a rendition of Amazing Grace for us. Thank you very much. The Greater Milford Community Chorus will now sing God Bless America. Very nice. Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to invite the Honorable Francis J. Larkin, former judge of the Milford District Court and colonel in the Massachusetts National Guard, to lay the wreath at the monument. Here it comes. Thank you, Colonel Larkin. I'd like to introduce a student, a senior at Milford High School, Michael Shea, and he'll be reading the Gettysburg Address.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our forefathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggle here, have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or to detract. The world will little note, nor will remember what we say here, but will never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who have fought here for thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from honored dead we take increased devotion to the cause from which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we are highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have new birth to freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Very nice job. For our closing remarks, I'd like to introduce the chairperson of the Milford Historical Commission, Robert Andriola.
Thank you, Brian. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for participating in a wonderful day. Beautiful weather. It couldn't be more perfect. It's a day of celebration and a day of remembrance. I'd also like to extend a thank you to the Selectmen, the Park Department, and the Historical Commission for working together on this program. I would also like to extend a very special thank you to Anne Lamontagne of the Historical Commission. Anne is right there. She is our inspiration. Her dedication and her hard work has made this day a success. Thank you, Anne. With that said, I'd like to now invite all of you to Memorial Hall to continue this program, to enjoy refreshments, and to visit our historic museum. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day.
I'm very proud of the fact that I participated in this particular rededication ceremony. It was 100 years ago that the first dedication occurred here in the town of Milford, and it's wonderful to see that people appreciate and recognize the importance of Daniel Chester French's equestrian monument of General Draper today. It's really more about the people and their recognition of a great work of art in their own backyard, and the fact that there was a local person who did tremendous things during his lifetime, and he's memorialized here at Draper Park. It definitely puts it on the map as far as I'm concerned. And you know, French created over 100 sculptures during his lifetime, and one of them are right here. And those sculptures are located all over the United States. So Milford should be very proud.
And I am the grandson of the General Draper here. So I came to celebrate the announcement of the statue as the gift from Susan Preston to the town of Milford, along with 10 other family descendants. Well, it means a lot to see what my great-great-grandfather, the General, has done for the town of Milford and Hopedale, and for the state of Massachusetts, and for the Union as a whole, to represent Milford and Massachusetts, being the ambassador of Italy. And it's really surreal to see that, one man can do all this, well, so can another, so it's very inspiring as well for myself and a lot of my siblings to drive by here and have the ceremony with the high school and everyone else contributing to the ceremony. It blows me away. It's fantastic. I think it's great for the town to come together for a general cause of unionship, for the town of Milford as well as Massachusetts and the United States as a whole, to bring back, well, to just bring in the American liberty of our statues, and as well as the people in Congress and everyone else, to be representatives of the people of Milford, Massachusetts, and the country. Well, we've made it 100 years since, and it's great to educate the town, to see where it came from, the history, to where it can go for the next 100 years. Hopefully 100 years from now, we'll have a big party celebratory. And it's amazing that 100 years ago, 10,000 people came to embark on this great statue. It's really amazing.